Hey folks, it's me, Robin, coming to you live from my house to talk to you about choosing technology with intention as part of this 2-week Design Forward module. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk about a few of these slides that are available to you if you are on the module homepage. What we're talking about today is not just technology and tools, and not just choosing particular tools, but really about the intentionality behind choosing our tools. The suggestion here is not so much that these couple of weeks are going to help you identify better tools to use in your teaching, although they might. The idea really is that we want to pause and think about just how much intention we're bringing to the table when we choose the technologies that we use in our teaching. And I'm going to start with a framing quotation from a very famous educational theorist, Martha Burtis. You may have heard of her. She's a very big deal. But Martha's starting here with an idea that even if we think of it as somewhat neutral, that our technology is very much mediating our teaching. The most obvious example of this, I think, is the learning management system. We call it the LMS. Here at Plymouth, we currently have Canvas. And Canvas is a great tool. Many of us use it pretty robustly, but it's set up in a particular way that it ends up dictating lots of the decisions that we make about our teaching. And one of the questions that we want to raise this week is, when something like that happens with a tool, what might we gain if we pause, step back, and ask critical questions about how the design of that tool is coding the way that we function in our classes with our students. A lot of the work that Martha and I do is informed by Audrey Waters. She actually gave this talk about machine learning at Plymouth, or part of the Academic Technology Institute for USNH a couple years back. Yeah, there's Big Toe. She's saying hi. Hello, Big Toe. Speaking of machines, Big Toe is not a machine. And Audrey's really interested, I think, in machine learning, and in particular, how things that we don't think of as machine learning, right? Like ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, like we get it, that's machine learning, or maybe even robo grading a Scantron sheet. But what Audrey's interested in is the way that machines in general permeate our educational landscape. And she wants to know what might be lost of our humanity if we don't question what effect all of these machines are having on how we teach, how we learn, and how we interact with each other. Chris Gilliard, another person who's visited Plymouth recently, he writes about educational privacy, and he has some really interesting data in some studies that he often quotes about how algorithms are biased. And now that's not news to any of you who have studied technology or how algorithms work, whether it be in Google or Twitter or anything else. But he talks particularly in educational technology, how some of the algorithms have really set up certain kinds of learners to be marked in different ways. In particular, algorithms that predict whether students will succeed in school. Studies have shown that they are using race as a predictor, so that if you are a student of color, you end up being more likely to be predicted not to graduate from college with these tools. One of the biggest problems with this, besides the bias that's baked into many of our tech tools, is that many of us who use these tools, we don't have the literacy that we need to know how the tool is put together or how it's working. All we see is the dashboard that pops up that says this student is at risk. And this actually used to be part of our EAB dashboard that we had at Plymouth, and your student would pop right up in your face at the beginning, whether they were at great risk, medium risk. But how those algorithms worked were not things that we necessarily had inputted ourselves. So who are the companies that are managing this, and how are these tools becoming encoded? And what do we need to learn about them to be ethical consumers and stewards of these tools? Sean Michael Morris talks about, as we're becoming more critical about the tools we're using, and I don't mean critical like, we don't support using them. I mean critical in that we are learning more about them and asking more questions. What he's really suggesting is that the point of all of this is so that we can talk through the screen, not to the screen. So in other words, we don't let the technology get in the way of the relationships that we have with our students and with our content to a certain degree. So what do we have to know about the tech to understand how it's functioning so that we can be sure that the tech is not producing an effect that we don't want it to have on our students' learning? Jade Davis, in conclusion, as the final slide here, talks about, she's particularly interested in how the technology is always collecting data, right? This is one of the things we love, even at Plymouth, like we're going to use TaskStream, not just because it might be good for our students, but particularly because it collects a lot of data along the way. We can use that with our creditors and so on and so on. But what Jade asks us to think about is the sort of fetishization that we have for things that generate numbers and quantification. That because we can measure and quantify something, it becomes therefore more important than the things that are harder to measure or can't be quantified. So in education, our technologies are moving more and more towards these data-driven kinds of assessments. You may like that, you may not like that, but it certainly changes and makes our pedagogy something that interacts much more with the world of quantification than perhaps it used to. So really what Martha and I are asking you to do in the 2 weeks that we have together now is not so much to choose particular tools or decide certain tools are terrible, but instead just to think, hey, I use a lot of technology in my teaching, and of course, lots of things count as technology. You can think of a pen and pencil as technology, but thinking of all the different technologies that you use, let's really step back and ask ourselves, why do we use them? In what ways do we celebrate what they afford for us and our learners? And what things do we not understand or are problematic about our tools? And what tools might we use or adapt or adopt if we could find any technology that we wanted? Like what is our technology failing to do now that we wish it did better? So we're just going back to square one. Instead of just taking what's given, we're asking more questions and trying to develop more critical literacy around the technologies that we use in our teaching every day. Thanks, and I shall see you in the module.